Hi everyone, I'm Sarthak. I'm a student with Nick Feamster, and this is joint work presented by with Roya and Nick. So in this work, I present a really interesting case study we had on this unique data set we got from Comcast, where we upgraded connections. Basically, Comcast upgraded connections of really high-speed tier users, but they did not tell them that their connections are being upgraded. And what we were interested in is when people get higher connectivity, when they're already very high speed, they already have very high speed tiers, and they still get higher speed tiers without telling them. Is there a change in behavior, or can we compare these two and see what kind of traffic patterns change? So why is this an interesting question, especially when it comes to high speed tier? Well, first of all, ISPs such as Comcast are really interested in whether they should invest more in the network. Now, you have a bunch of users who have, say, 105 Mbps plan, right? And then Comcast, say, comes up with this little technology. They make a breakthrough in this DOCSIS modem, and they want to decide whether they should invest in improving the network now, or make a different network provisioning algorithm or something. So they're really interested in whether they'll be getting the return of the investment, as in, will users even use this new technology if they upgrade them or not? A second entity which might be interested in this kind of study, where you're looking at very high speed tiers and service upgrades of these high speed tiers, is a policy, a regulation policy entity such as the FCC in the US. So recently, actually last year, I think FCC redefined the broadband benchmark limits to 25 Mbps in the download from 10 Mbps. And they did a little survey throughout the US to find out, if there is broadband available in your state or in the place you're living, why aren't users still taking broadband? And it turns out that the price is not the major factor for users to not subscribe to broadband. In fact, they say that they don't want broadband. Their demand is not as much, and that's why they don't take broadband, which makes traffic demand really important to study. Basically, we want to see whether right now, FCC is now interested in considering benchmarks which are based on traffic demand rather than the capacity directly. So what they say is, like, maybe schools should have such a broadband benchmark versus a household with 4 people should have such a broadband benchmark. So there's been a lot of previous work in studying broadband performance, but not so much in studying broadband demand or user demand. One of the major studies was presented in IMC in 2014, where the authors did natural experiments, as in they took readings of how much demand is there in each home, and they calculated the utilization of the link. So they had these multiple readings coming from across the globe, right? Now, these users are in very different settings. So what they did was they binned very similar users together, as in a bunch of users having the same ISP or the same price range or the same performance are all bunched together. And then they can compare users across group and go like, oh, if we change the capacity, then this is what changes in the demand. Or if we change the price, this is what changes in the demand. So the authors did this study, and they found out that yes, usage is strongly correlated with the group's link capacity, which is an obvious result. But they also found that when a service upgrade is performed for a particular group which they've bunched together, then also this correlation occurs, as in, as you improve the service tier, the usage increases or the demand increases. But there are certain limitations to this kind of study, and what we do over here is a kind of complement to this study. So first of all, in this kind of natural experiment study, where you have a lot of readings all over and then you naturally bin them and then compare them, because these readings are from the consumers themselves who updated their connection, that's why consumers who upgrade their service, we know that they're already unsatisfied, as in, once they upgrade their service, they will increase their usage. Secondly, when consumers know that they're upgrading their usage, they will naturally start to use more internet. So there seems to be a sort of a cognitive bias which occurs here. Then, because these readings are collected directly from the home, there's a chance that this data collection is basically biased towards only peak hours. So it's not like overall throughout the day you're getting all that data. And lastly, I mean, as I said, that this approach is a natural experiment-based approach, wherein they try to take each factor and bunch users together. If all these users have the same factors, then they can compare them. But there might be hidden factors which are missed. For example, demographics or region or ISP, which are not taken into account when you're comparing users. So what we want to do is we want to present a similar study of traffic demand response to service tier upgrades, but a complementary study using a different approach. So our aim over here is, how do users adapt their demands if an ISP offers higher speeds when they're already satisfied? So what I mean by when they're already satisfied is that we'll be concentrating more on high service tiers. For this data set, we basically, Comcast basically did this experiment wherein they took a group of users in the same city, same location, everything, and they upgraded them from 105 Mbps capacity to 250 Mbps capacity, but they did not tell them that they're upgrading them. And and some of the highlights of the results we found, which were kind of surprising and unique, is that you usually expect that the bunch of users which are actually using their internet a lot will be the ones which use it more when they get upgraded. But that, I mean, although that happened, what we surprisingly saw that is that even the people who don't really saturate their links or are not really using their links, there is a large difference between the two groups. So for both the 105, for the 250 Mbps, you see a high increase in the demand for the 250 Mbps upgraded group. Another cool thing we found was that there is a significant difference in the demand of these two groups during non-prime time hours. So by non-prime time, I mean like the day hours, because usually for households, the internet users peaks during the evening hours, like 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. sort of hours. But we found that for once we upgraded the connection, the internet usage was actually going higher during non-prime time hours. So I'll get into the details of the data as well as the method now, after which we can come to the evaluation. So the methodology we used in the paper was randomized control trials. Basically, the aim was to eliminate all kinds of biases that can occur and study the relationship between demand and capacity for two groups of users, the control and the treatment group. Basically, this means that we have a bunch of control group users, and we randomly select a certain treatment group out of it. All these users belong to the same city, the same price, same ISP, and they don't know that they're being upgraded. The only factor, as in the only intervention, which is difference between these two groups, is that there is an unannounced service upgrade on one of the groups. So basically, the control group has a kind of a placebo, whereas the treatment group gets the service upgrade. And the methodology over here is that we'll compare the traffic demand for both these groups during the same time period. So a bit of details about the data. Basically, these were Comcast subscribers in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they were paying for a 105 Mbps plan. What we could record is the network usage byte counters every 15 minutes. And we recorded them for 3 months after the upgrade happened. Now, there were initially 20K subscribers, and 10% of them were upgraded to the 250 Mbps tier without their knowledge. But what we saw was that there was some kind of a lost data. Basically, there were some subscribers which were not really responding to the queries for the network byte counters too much. So we decided to take a threshold, as in only the households which have at least an 80% response rate across the 3 months were finally considered for our final data set, for which the analysis I'll be presenting. So our finalized data set contains 4845 subscribers in the control group, which maintain 105 Mbps link. And the treatment group contains 1519 subscribers, which get a 250 Mbps link, but they're paying for a 105 one, and they don't know about the upgrade. So just like any other study, there are certain limitations to the methodology of this of randomized control trial, as well as the way we collect data. First of all, we have only network byte counters every 15 minutes, right? So because it's only byte counters, as in uplink number of bytes and downlink number of bytes, we can't really tell what changed. We don't know what the source and destination is or what flow was there, but we can only tell like this number of bytes are higher in the treatment group or not. Secondly, the granularity is 15 minutes. So we can't really interpret anything which is like link utilization. So what we'll be talking about throughout the presentation is more like the number of bytes transferred rather than the number of Mbps. That would not work. Mbps would not work in this case because of the high granularity. And lastly, we do the comparison between traffic demands during the same time period. So we're not doing A and B testing as in before upgrade or after upgrade, no. This is basically we upgrade the connection and then we compare the two groups of subscribers during the same 3 months. All right, so that actually brings me to the evaluation metrics. This is, in our paper there are actually 4 evaluation metrics, but I'm gonna skip the last one for this particular presentation. You can look at the paper for that. And you don't have to remember this. I'll go through each and every metric as we come to the result. But you can take this as an outline of the remaining talk. All right, so the first thing we'll talk about is the average traffic demand per subscriber. What this basically means is that we'll be looking at the bytes transferred per subscriber on an average for both the groups, the treatment and the control group. So this is an average plot of this is a plot of an average weekday subscriber. On the x-axis is time of the day. Every 2 hours has 8 measurement points because the measurements were performed every 15 minutes. And on the y-axis is the bytes transferred for an average subscriber. For both, and we're comparing both the treatment group and the control group over here. So the takeaway over here is that we see a large difference in the average subscriber demand during the midday hours, which is like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., which is a bit surprising because you usually expect the difference would occur in the peak hours, right? In the night when they're actually using their internet more. Now over here, I'm just comparing the weekday plot in the previous slide to the weekend plot. And over here, we see that the weekday plot has a more monotonically increasing pattern, which sort of peaks around 8 p.m. in the night, whereas in the weekends, the usage comes to a certain plateau around 10 a.m. and then sticks to that plateau and then rises up again in the night. So basically, that affects the median demand. If you calculate it over weekend and weekdays, it basically shows that the behavior is different over these two kind of days. And we see that the median demand over the weekend is higher, around 10 to 13 MB higher for an average subscriber. So that was just an overview of the kind of traffic demand we'll see in both the groups. But now we're interested in like what is exactly changing in both of these. Why is the usage different in both these groups? So for this, we're going to plot the peak traffic demand per subscriber. What this means is that for every subscriber, I can have a certain 95th percentile demand taken over the whole measurement period. And I'm going to compare this 95th percentile demand for each subscriber in both of these groups. So for this comparison, I drew a CDF. So basically, the y-axis is a cumulative fraction, and the x-axis is in log scale of the traffic demand. And each point on the CDF represents a subscriber in that particular group. So what this plot shows is that there is a significant gap which occurs somewhere here. So just looking at this plot, we can sort of divide all these subscribers in 3 areas. We can say these are like the low hitting subscribers which don't really use their internet too much. These are the heavy hitting subscribers which are using their internet a lot in both these groups. And these are the moderate ones. And the surprising part about this plot is that there is a significant difference in the moderate subscribers. I mean, of course, this is a log plot, so it's difficult to interpret visually how much the difference is. So to interpret that difference, I'm going to calculate the difference between these two for every percentile. So basically, from this plot, we can go to this plot, which is the difference between the treatment group minus the control group demand for each particular percentile of subscribers. So over here on the left, you have subscribers which had a low demand in both groups. On the Wait, is that the right? Yeah, it's right for you guys, right? Okay, on the right you have the heavy hitters for both the groups. And I'm taking the difference between the treatment group and the control group. And in the middle you have the moderate subscribers for both the groups. Now the surprising part about this is that the moderate subscribers have a very large difference between the treatment and the control group. And this we think is unexpected, because usually you would expect that for lower tier especially, that when you upgrade the service tier for low tier bandwidth capacity, you would see a high increase in the heavy subscriber, but maybe not too much in the lower one, because the heavy ones are the ones who are really saturating the link, right? But somehow this kind of behavior happens. And what we think is that so there could be two factors over here. Like either the people changed their behavior, in the treatment group they started visiting more websites or doing something different, or they did not change their behavior consciously, but the quality of experience may be increasing. For example, earlier they were getting Netflix at a lower rate, but now they're getting something at a higher rate. So we don't really know. With our data we can't confirm this, but this is just what we think would have happened. But the thing is, this plot was calculated over all 3 months. So the peak value which we took here to take the difference was calculated over 3 months. Now we want to know whether this difference occurs daily. Like, is it just a factor which comes over the whole 3 months, or does this actually happen daily? And it turns out that we see a similar pattern when we do daily peaks. So over here, each point is basically the 95th percentile per subscriber demand per day. And this is the difference between the two lines. And over here we see that there is still that kind of a gap occurring in the moderate subscriber per day. It seems that 70% of the total subscribers exhibit like a 5 to 20 MB difference in the peak demand. And also 40% of the subscribers in the treatment group have more than double the peak demand of the control group. So basically in the moderate subscribers over there have actually double the demand when it comes to the treatment group as compared to the control group. Okay, so after talking about the traffic demand per subscriber, I want to talk about the prime time ratio, which is an important quantity from the perspective of an ISP. So the prime time is defined by the FCC as the ratio of the average hourly traffic demand during prime time hours, which is the highest peak hours during the day, versus the traffic demand during non-prime time hours. Now, originally the FCC defined this as 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., but in our data we found that the traffic demand actually peaks during 8 p.m. to 12 a.m., and that's what we're going to use. So this table shows the hourly traffic, the weekday hourly traffic during prime time and non-prime time, and dividing column 1 by column 2 gives us the prime time ratio. And what we see is that for the treatment and the control group, the prime time traffic is actually almost similar. So this is the average traffic per subscriber during prime time, whereas the non-prime time traffic is actually quite different between the two. And for the weekend, the quantities are actually similar. So the prime time ratio turns out to be very similar in the two. What this basically means is that the treatment group on weekdays had a higher demand during non-prime time. So we think that this might be because there might be some people who work at home. Maybe that's why they have a higher demand. And it turned out that there were a bunch of users in the treatment group and the control group which had a prime time ratio of less than 1. And less than 1 ratio can only occur when traffic in the prime time was lesser than the non-prime time. So it sort of supports our claim that there are maybe some households which have a business at home or are working at home which have a higher demand during non-prime time hours rather than the prime time hour, which is 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. So that gets us to the summary of my talk. So first of all, the methodology we followed was a randomized control trial to compare subscriber demands between two groups of very high service tier subscribers. We know that the users are not exhausting the available capacity in this case. In fact, when we calculated the utilization, it turned out to be 1 to 1.5% for both the groups. However, even though they're not really exhausting the capacity, it turns out that the moderate subscribers have a higher demand, have a large difference in demand for the treatment group as compared to the control group, which was kind of surprising. And the most significant differences were observed during the non-prime time hours, especially on the weekdays. So we're really interested in applying the same analysis to a lower tier group, just to see that if we get the same plot, where, moderate subscribers are still getting more demand versus the high volume subscribers. So in case any of you have like that data set, feel free to steal my code and apply it. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for a couple of questions over here.
Can we go back to your conclusion slide, please?
Yep, absolutely.
So your third point there, I have a question about that. So can we go back to your plot where you first showed the peak ratio?
Peak ratio?
Yeah.
This one?
So on the far right, it's actually a higher ratio than
Definitely.
in the middle. Can you talk to us about that?
Right. So on the far right is something which I say is an expected plot. Like for example, for a lower service tier, I was actually expecting something which goes like a flat line and then a high difference for the very heavy subscriber. This basically means that the very heavy subscribers in the 250 Mbps dataset are utilizing their capacity more versus the very heavy subscriber in the 105 Mbps dataset. Because this is the difference, it's the difference between the really heavy users in both datasets. So that part on the far right is actually expected for, I think, a lot of service tiers. Of course, I can't say for sure because I haven't done this analysis on lower service tiers. I don't have that data, but that's something I was expecting. But this is the part which I found a bit unexpected.
Okay, it's just the way you described, you focused on those.
The moderate ones.
And you made it sound like they increased, whereas the high users didn't.
Oh no,
also
yeah.
increased.
Yeah, sorry about that. The aim was to say that that part is not surprising, but this one is. Yeah.
Other questions over there? Maybe the gentleman in blue first.
Hey, I'm trying to understand how representative your users are. So I don't know much about the Comcast pricing model. So do you know how many users are in this tier of 105 Mbps?
So
how much of the total Comcast users?
Right. So I don't really know about how much of the total Comcast users, but just saying this, like in Salt Lake City, they had 20K subscribers, which means that for any major city, they would have at least that much. And this is true for a lot of ISPs. Like a lot of people, households have 100 Mbps connection in their homes, right? And I think 20K is pretty like good in terms of representation when it comes to large cities. And yeah, I mean, we actually feel like these results would be similar for a lot of other large cities too, as long as you're looking at like high service tiers.
But how would you feel if you did them for say 20 Mbps?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like I don't know, but I kind of expect that it'll be a flat line and then higher. For basically when you come to lower service tiers, you expect that when you change the access tier, even without telling the users, they'll start using more data, right? But when you come to higher service tiers, you can't really be sure about that because you know that they're not really utilizing the link really, right? So, which was why these results are more, well, unknown and surprising, I guess. But for a lower service tiers, I would expect that if you do the upgrade, they will start using more of the capacity. Yeah.
Okay, well, there, and then the rest of them will have to go and break.
Hi.
Hey.
I was just wondering, after you upgraded them, if you know whether they were downgraded again, and if they noticed that the connection went down, speed went down, and if they did, maybe they called customer service, which would tell you that they indeed noticed in the first place that they were upgraded.
First of all, I don't think Comcast records customer service at all. Like that's my own personal experience. But no, we don't know if they actually eventually got downgraded or not. All we know is that just before we got this data, they were upgraded like the previous month. But and this is based on 3 months of data. And if they got downgraded later on, Comcast did not really tell us about that part. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.